The bus hissed to a stop in front of Westfield High School. Kira Washington stood first, her backpack gripped tight against her chest. She nudged Zara, who pulled out her earbuds with a sigh. "Let's just get this over with," Kira whispered. The twins stepped off the bus together. The morning sun hit the brick building, making it look almost friendly. Almost. But Kira noticed everything else. The stares that followed them. The whispers that started the moment their feet touched the pavement. The way conversations stopped mid-sentence. Zara lifted her chin, eyes forward. "Don't look at them," she muttered through a tight smile. "They're just curious." But Kira knew better. This wasn't curiosity. This was something else entirely. They walked side by side toward the entrance, perfectly in sync. Despite the weight pressing down on their shoulders, heads turned, groups huddled closer together. Someone coughed a word that sounded suspiciously like a slur, followed by muffled laughter. "Fresh meat!" a voice called out, loud enough to be heard but quiet enough to deny. Kira counted her breaths like her grandfather had taught her. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Her fingers brushed against Zara's, a silent signal they had used since childhood. Stay calm. Inside, the hallway buzzed with activity. Lockers slammed, voices echoed off linoleum floors. But as the Washington twins moved forward, a strange pattern emerged. Students stepped into their path, forcing them to dodge and weave. A shoulder check sent Kira stumbling into the wall. "Oh, sorry," said a blonde girl with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Didn't see you there." Zara's hand curled into a fist. Kira touched her sister's wrist. Not yet. They found their lockers side by side near the end of the main corridor. Before they could reach them, a wall of bodies appeared. 3 boys in Letterman jackets, led by one who stood slightly taller than the rest. His smile was easy, practiced, dangerous. "Well, look who it is," he said, leaning against the lockers as if he owned them. "The new students." The pause before students hung in the air like poison. Kira studied him carefully. Square jaw, broad shoulders, eyes that measured everything they saw. This was someone used to power. "We need to get to our lockers," Kira said quietly. The boy's smile widened. "I'm Tyler Vance, and you're blocking my view." His friends laughed as if this was the funniest thing they had ever heard. "Your locker is down there," Zara pointed out, her voice sharp. "Number 217. We're 143 and 144. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "Been checking me out already? I'm flattered, but move." Zara said the word clipped and hard. From the corner of her eye, Kira spotted a figure watching from the gym doorway. A man in his 50s, arms crossed over a polo shirt, stretched tight across his chest. His face was expressionless, but his eyes were fixed directly on them. On his chest, the school logo, and beneath it, Coach Langford. He didn't move, didn't intervene, just watched with a look that said he approved of every second. They turned to take the long way. Tyler called after them. "Welcome to Westfield, girls. We're going to have so much fun this year." The laughter that followed chased them all the way to their first class. English was taught by Mr. Peterson, a balding man with tired eyes who barely looked up when they entered. He pointed to 2 empty seats without checking their names and continued writing on the whiteboard. Kira opened her notebook, focusing on the lesson about the Great Gatsby. She felt the stares boring into her back but didn't turn around. Stay invisible. That was the plan. As the class progressed, something hit Zara's desk, a folded piece of paper. Kira watched from the corner of her eye as her sister unfolded it, her face changing from curiosity to something hard and cold. Kira leaned over slightly. On the paper, someone had drawn a crude picture and written a single word, a racial slur that made her stomach clench. Zara's breath hitched. She raised her hand. Mr. Peterson sighed. Yes, Miss Washington. Zara said, "Someone passed me this note." She held it up. Mr. Peterson walked over, squinted at it, then glanced around the room. His eyes lingered on a group of boys in the back who were suddenly very interested in their textbooks. "I see," he said, taking the paper. He crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. Then he walked back to the board. As I was saying, Fitzgerald's use of color symbolism, that was it. No acknowledgement, no discipline, nothing. Zara's knuckles went white around her pencil. Kira reached across the aisle and touched her arm. Wait. By lunchtime, the pattern was clear. This wasn't random. This was organized practice. A system where everyone knew their role except the twins. The cafeteria was a minefield. They found an empty table in the corner and set down their trays. "I hate this place," Zara whispered fiercely. "Did you see how that teacher just—" "I know," Kira said. "Just eat. We'll figure it out." They were halfway through their lunch when a group of girls walked by. One tripped, so obviously fake that several people were already laughing before it happened, and her carton of milk sailed through the air, splashing across both their shirts. "Oh my God, I'm so clumsy," the girl exclaimed, her hand covering her mouth in mock horror. "Someone should really mop this floor better." The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Milk dripped from Zara's braids onto her lap. Kira stood frozen, feeling the cold liquid seep through to her skin. A teacher appeared, not to help, but to tell them to clean up. No one offered paper towels. No one said a word to the girl who was now high-fiving her friends at another table. After school, they waited outside Principal Brooks' office. Kira had insisted they report everything. "There are rules," she told Zara. "If we don't tell them what's happening, they can pretend they don't know." Principal Brooks was a thin woman with short blonde hair and a smile that never seemed to move the rest of her face. She listened to their account with her hands folded neatly on her desk. "I understand your concerns," she said when they finished. "Moving to a new school can be quite an adjustment." "This isn't about adjustment," Zara said, her voice rising. "That note had—" "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding," Principal Brooks interrupted, her smile tightening. "Our students are very welcoming once you get to know them." "But the milk," Kira started. "Accidents happen in crowded cafeterias," Principal Brooks said. She stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "Give it time, focus on your studies. I'm sure by next week you'll feel right at home." They were dismissed with another tight smile and promises to keep an eye on things. The walk home was quiet. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. Kira felt something building inside her, not just anger, but understanding, the terrible clarity of seeing a system for what it really was. Beside her, Zara trembled with barely contained rage. "They're not going to do anything," she said. "Did you see her face? She doesn't care." When Zara's pace quickened, her steps becoming heavier, more purposeful, Kira reached out and gripped her wrist. "Wait," she said softly. Zara stopped, looking at her sister's hand, then up to her face. "For what? For them to decide we're worth protecting?" Kira shook her head slowly. "The rules don't apply here," she said, the realization settling cold and heavy in her chest. "Not for us." Zara's eyes widened, then narrowed with understanding. The twins stood there, connected by touch and something deeper, as the truth of their situation settled around them like shadows. The screen door creaked as Kira and Zara stepped into Mrs. Gloria Hayes' kitchen. The smell of cornbread and beans wrapped around them like a warm blanket, fighting against the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "There's my girls," Mrs. Gloria Hayes said, her lined face creasing with a smile that faltered when she saw their stained clothes. "What happened here?" "Spilled milk," Kira said quickly. "Cafeteria accident." Mrs. Gloria Hayes's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice stayed gentle. "Well, Go on and change. Dinner's almost ready. Upstairs, they peeled off the milk-crusted shirts in silence. Zara's hands shook as she pulled on a clean t-shirt. We can't tell her, Kira said softly. I know, Zara's jaw clenched. She'd just worry. Dinner was quiet, except for the clink of spoons against bowls. Mrs. Gloria Hayes watched them over her reading glasses, noting how they picked at their food. How was the first day? She asked finally. Make any friends? It was fine, Kira said. Just still getting used to things. Everyone's real friendly, Zara added, her voice dripping with sarcasm she couldn't quite hide. Mrs. Gloria Hayes set down her spoon. Listen here, she said softly. I've lived in this town 40 years. I know what it can be like. If something's happening, we're okay, Mrs. Hayes, Kira cut in. Really? Their foster mother studied them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right then, but remember what I always say. The twins finished in unison, managing small smiles. The Lord helps those who help themselves. That's right. Mrs. Gloria Hayes touched each of their hands, and so do I. After dinner, as Mrs. Gloria Hayes settled into her evening programs, the twins slipped out to the backyard. The grass was overgrown, creating natural markers in the dying light. Ready? Kira asked. Zara nodded, dropping into a fighting stance their grandfather had drilled into them since they could walk. Back straight, weight distributed, hands loose but ready. They moved through the form slowly, at first. Block, strike, pivot. Their grandfather's voice echoed in their memories. Breath is life. Control your breath. Control the fight. As darkness fell, they picked up speed. Their shadows danced across Mrs. Gloria Hayes's flower beds as they sparred. Never full contact, but with increasing intensity. Duck, weave, counter. The movements came naturally, muscle memory built over years of training. Remember what Grandpa said? Kira whispered as they circled each other. The first rule, Zara finished, never start it, but always finish it. They trained until sweat soaked their shirts and their breathing came in controlled gasps. Only then did they head inside, where Mrs. Gloria Hayes had dozed off in her recliner. The next morning brought fresh tension. In gym class, Coach Langford's smile had too many teeth as he divided them into pairs for wrestling practice. Washington, he barked at Zara. You're with Thompson. Thompson was a senior, at least 50 pounds heavier than Zara. He grinned as she approached the mat. Don't worry, Coach Langford said, his voice honey-sweet with mockery. I'm sure you can handle it. The first takedown was hard enough to knock the wind from Zara's lungs. Coach Langford nodded approvingly. Good for him, Thompson. Again. Kira watched from across the gym. Her hands balled into fists as Thompson slammed Zara down repeatedly. Each time, Coach Langford found some reason why Zara's technique was wrong, why she needed to learn the hard way. When the bell finally rang, Zara's arms were covered in mat burns. She didn't say a word as they changed, but Kira saw the rage building behind her eyes. The cafeteria was crowded when they entered. They got their food and headed for the usual corner table, threading through the maze of students. They were almost there when Tyler stepped into their path, flanked by his usual group. His Letterman jacket was like a banner of authority, his smile sharp with anticipated pleasure. Hey there, he said, loud enough to draw attention. Having a good day? Kira stepped forward. Move, please. Or what? Tyler's eyes locked onto Zara's tray. You going to do something about it? The cafeteria grew quieter, heads turned. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Last warning, Kira said softly. Step aside. Tyler's hands shot out, knocking Zara's tray upward. Food splattered across her shirt. The slur he whispered was quiet, but clear in the sudden silence. A circle formed around them, students pressing in to watch. Some had phones out, already recording. The air crackled with anticipation, everyone waiting for the new girls to prove whatever story they had already decided was true. Kira stepped between Tyler and her sister. Her voice was ice. "Back off!" Tyler's response was a hard shove that sent her stumbling backward. The cafeteria went dead silent. Kira regained her balance and straightened slowly. Her expression changed, not to anger, but to something colder, more dangerous. The look of someone who had been waiting for permission. The circle of students tightened, trapping them all together. The cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed as Tyler's face twisted with rage, his fist already swinging in a wild arc toward Kira's head. But where others saw chaos, Kira saw geometry, angles, momentum, pressure points her grandfather had drilled into her bones. She stepped inside his punch with practiced ease, her movement fluid as water. Her left hand deflected his strike while her right trapped his forearm against her chest. The position was perfect, just as her grandfather had shown her 1,000 times on summer evenings. "Control the center," his voice whispered in her memory. "Make their strength work against them." One sharp twist. That's all it took. The crack echoed through the cafeteria like a gunshot. Tyler's scream followed a heartbeat later as he collapsed to his knees, cradling his broken wrist. His lunch tray clattered across the floor, spraying food and milk in a wide arc. "You broke my—" His words dissolved into incoherent howls of pain and rage. Two more boys lunged forward, Jason Thompson from wrestling class and Marcus Webb, another football player. Their faces glowed with righteous anger, certain their numbers would overwhelm these girls who dared fight back. Zara moved like lightning. She pivoted on her back foot, all her power concentrated into one devastating strike. Her fist drove up under Thompson's ribs with surgical precision. The impact lifted him off his feet as all the air exploded from his lungs. He crumpled, gasping like a landed fish. Webb charged forward, arms spread wide for a tackle. Zara's legs swept out in a perfect arc, catching him behind the knee. As he stumbled, she grabbed his shirt and used his own momentum to slam him into the floor. The impact rattled lunch trays and made teeth clench throughout the room. "Behind you!" Zara shouted. Kira felt rather than saw the fourth attacker, Derek Wilson, trying to lock her in a bear hug from behind. Her response was instant, instinctive. She dropped her center of gravity, just as they had practiced countless times. Her elbow shot back, finding the sweet spot in his solar plexus. As he doubled over, she gripped his arm and turned, using his forward momentum to throw him over her hip. He hit the ground hard, all the air rushing from his lungs in a wheezing gasp. The sound of his impact seemed to break the spell of silence that had fallen over the cafeteria. The entire exchange had taken less than 30 seconds. The aftermath was a tableau of broken pride and shattered assumptions. Tyler curled around his wrist, face streaked with tears he couldn't hide. Thompson still couldn't breathe properly, making wet, gasping sounds as he tried to stand. Webb lay spread-eagled, staring at the ceiling with glazed eyes. Wilson had managed to crawl a few feet away, leaving his dignity behind on the floor. Then came the phones. They rose like a wave, dozens of them, capturing every angle of the aftermath. The clicking of cameras mixed with excited whispers and shocked exclamations. "Did you see those girls? Just someone call—" Coach Langford's voice cut through the chaos, dripping with venom. "Animals! Look what these animals did!" He pushed through the crowd, his face red with fury. "This is exactly what I—" Security finally arrived, bursting through the cafeteria doors with walkie-talkies crackling. They grabbed the twins roughly. ignoring their calm attempts to explain. They attacked us, Tyler wailed from the floor, playing to his audience, but we didn't do anything. In Principal Brooks' office, the contrast in treatment was stark. While the boys were escorted to the nurse's office with gentle concern, the twins were treated like dangerous criminals. They sat straight-backed in hard plastic chairs as accusations flew. Unprovoked assault, Principal Brooks said, her voice tight with disapproval. Excessive force. This kind of violent behavior. They defended themselves, Mrs. Gloria Hayes interrupted firmly when she arrived. And I want to see the video before anyone makes any decisions. By evening, they didn't need to look for the video. It found them. The footage spread across social media like wildfire, spawning hashtags and heated debates. Some called it self-defense. Others labeled it an attack. Everyone had an opinion. News vans appeared on their street as the sun set, their lights casting long shadows across Mrs. Gloria Hayes's front lawn. Reporters stood in the gathering dark speaking into cameras about racial tensions and school violence. Around evening, Mrs. Gloria Hayes received a call from attorney Marcus Hale. His voice crackled through the speaker as she put him on speakerphone in the living room. "I've seen the footage," he said. "All angles. The provocation is clear and the response was proportional. They've got no case against your girls. I'd like to represent them. Pro bono." In their shared bedroom, Kira and Zara sat on their beds, watching their phones light up with notifications, messages, comments, friend requests from strangers. The devices buzzed constantly with the weight of sudden unwanted fame. "You okay?" Kira asked softly. Zara nodded, still staring at her screen. "You?" "Yeah." Kira looked out their window at the news vans. "Think we went too far?" "No," Zara's voice was firm. "Grandpa always said, sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to show them exactly what they're dealing with." They finished together. Outside, camera flashes lit up the darkness like lightning bugs. Their phones kept buzzing. Somewhere in the house, they could hear Mrs. Gloria Hayes talking with the lawyer about next steps and statements. The twins sat in silence, watching their small-town story become a headline. The rain drummed against the school bus windows, turning the world outside into a gray smear. Kira watched droplets race down the glass, while Zara sat rigid beside her, both feeling the weight of eyes on their backs. No one sat in the seats near them. The school parking lot was a mess of puddles and news vans. Reporters huddled under umbrellas, shoving microphones towards students who hurried past. Principal Brooks stood at the main entrance, her smile fixed and artificial, as she assured a camera crew that appropriate measures were being taken. "Girls," attorney Marcus Hale waited under the bus shelter, his dark suit crisp despite the weather. "Walk in with me. Don't answer any questions." They moved through the crowd like a small fortress. Hale in front, the twins shoulder to shoulder behind him. Camera flashes sparked through the rain. Reporters shouted questions that blurred together. "Can you comment on yesterday's... Is it true that you... What message are you trying to... Oh." Inside, the hallways fell into tense silence. Students pressed against lockers as the twins passed, some filming with phones, others whispering behind hands. The confidence from yesterday had evaporated, replaced by wary calculation. In the main office, Principal Brooks sat behind her desk, her normally perfect hair slightly frazzled. "Due to the involvement of legal counsel," she said, not meeting their eyes, "all disciplinary actions are temporarily suspended pending a full investigation." "And the boys?" Hale asked, his voice sharp. "They're recovering," she said stiffly. "Their parents are considering options." "I'm sure they are." Hale's smile was cold. "Just as we're considering a civil rights lawsuit if any retribution occurs." The morning crawled by in uncomfortable silence. Teachers called roll without looking at the twins, then taught facing the board. In English, their usual seats were conspicuously empty. No one wanted to sit near them. During group work, other students pulled their chairs away slightly, as if violence might be contagious. Tyler was absent, but his friends glared from across rooms, their hatred barely contained. Coach Langford stood in his office doorway as they passed, his face twisted in a sneer that vanished when Hale walked by. "How long will you be here?" Kira asked Hale between classes. "As long as needed." He checked his phone. "I've got meetings with the school board and NAACP tomorrow. This isn't going away." That evening, rain still falling, Mrs. Gloria Hayes gathered them in the living room. The TV news played silently in the background, showing footage of the fight on repeat. "We need to pray," she said, holding their hands, "for strength, for peace, for those boys too." "Mrs. Hayes," Zara started, "I know, baby, but hate just makes more hate. We have to be better." Kira watched rain streak down the windows, wanting to believe that lawyers and prayers could fix this. The house felt smaller somehow, like the walls were pressing in. Outside, car headlights swept past regularly, people driving by slowly, staring at their house. "Maybe we should—" Kira's words cut off at a sharp crack from the front porch. The window exploded in orange light. Flames roared up the front wall, smoke already pouring through the broken glass. The acrid smell of gasoline filled the air. "Out now!" Kira grabbed Mrs. Gloria Hayes' arm while Zara ran for the back door. The older woman stumbled, coughing as smoke filled the living room. They half carried Mrs. Gloria Hayes through the kitchen as neighbors began shouting outside. Someone was calling 911. The twins got their foster mother to the backyard, then ran for garden hoses, but the flames were already climbing toward the roof. Fire trucks arrived within minutes, sirens wailing through the rain. Firefighters deployed hoses, working quickly to contain the blaze before it could spread inside. The twins held Mrs. Gloria Hayes as she shook, watching water and foam soak their home. Police cars arrived next, their lights painting the wet street in alternating red and blue. 2 officers walked the perimeter with flashlights, paying special attention to the burning porch. "Looks like faulty wiring," one said, barely glancing at the obvious splash pattern of accelerant. Could be, his partner agreed, ignoring the broken glass from the Molotov cocktails scattered across the yard. Kira's fists clenched as she watched them write in their notebooks, already deciding what this was and wasn't. Mrs. Gloria Hayes' hand touched her shoulder gently. "The Lord sees," she whispered, "even if they won't." Neighbors clustered under umbrellas, some offering sympathy, others staying conspicuously silent. The firefighters began packing up their gear. The damage was mostly contained to the porch and front wall, but the message was clear. Lawyers couldn't stop this kind of hate. One officer approached them, his notepad already closing. "Probably just old wiring. These houses, you know how they are. Insurance should cover it." Kira stared at him, at his practiced indifference, at the way he avoided their eyes. Silence hung between them like smoke, thick with unspoken accusations and denied justice. The officer shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "We'll, file a report." He retreated to his car where his partner was already starting the engine. Standing in the rain, watching police lights fade into the distance, Kira felt the weight of their silence. It wasn't just the officers. It was the teachers who looked away, the principal who chose not to see, the neighbors who decided not to speak up. Their silence was a weapon aimed straight at the twins' hearts, meant to tell them, "You don't matter. Your safety doesn't matter. Your truth doesn't matter." Streetlights gleamed off the wet pavement, casting strange shadows across the burned porch. Kira's hands tightened into fists as she watched the last police car turn the corner, leaving them alone with the smell of smoke and the sound of falling rain. The red and blue lights faded, leaving only the dim glow of street lamps and the steady hiss of rain. Yellow police tape fluttered around their porch, marking off the scorched wood and broken glass like some kind of sick artwork. Smoke still curled from the blackened boards, carrying the sharp scent of gasoline that the officers had chosen to ignore. Through the drizzle, Kira could hear the two policemen talking by their cruiser, their voices carrying across the wet lawn. "Can you believe that fight video? Those girls are something else." "Yeah, well, when people act like animals." Laughter followed, quick and ugly. They didn't bother lowering their voices, confident in their immunity. One officer took a few half-hearted photos with his phone, while the other scribbled notes that would probably disappear by morning. A black SUV pulled up, its headlights cutting through the rain. Chief Harlan Mercer stepped out, his uniform crisp despite the weather. He walked straight to his officers without sparing a glance at the burned porch or the family standing in their own yard. "Everything under control here?" His voice was low but carried clearly in the quiet street. "Yes, sir. Electrical fire. Looks like nothing suspicious." Mercer nodded, satisfied. "Good. Write it up clean, boys. No need to complicate things." He spoke quietly with them for a few more minutes, gesturing at their notepads. Then he returned to his SUV and drove away, never once looking at the twins or Mrs. Gloria Hayes. The message was clear. They were beneath his notice, their safety irrelevant to his version of justice. Inside the house, Mrs. Gloria Hayes' hands shook as she made tea, but her voice stayed steady. "We'll clean up tomorrow. The Lord will provide." Kira watched her foster mother carefully measure tea leaves, clinging to routine like a lifeline. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight, then 1, then 2. None of them could sleep. The smell of smoke had seeped into everything. Dawn crept in slowly, painting the kitchen in pale grays. Mrs. Gloria Hayes dozed in her chair, while the twins sat alert, watching the street through the windows. Cars drove by periodically, some slowing, others speeding up, all of them looking. At school, the halls felt colder. Students whispered and pointed at their backs, but something had shifted. The fear had hardened into something darker. When Kira opened her locker, a note fluttered out. "Watch your back. We know where you sleep." Another one appeared in Zara's textbook. Animals belong in cages. The threats were specific, detailed. Someone had been watching their house, noting their schedules, planning. The cowards wouldn't sign their names, but their intentions were clear. Between classes, Coach Langford's voice carried deliberately down the hallway as he talked to other teachers. "Those girls are dangerous, unstable. Just a matter of time before someone really gets hurt." He caught Kira's eye and smirked, knowing exactly what he was doing. Each word was carefully chosen, building a narrative that would justify whatever came next. Violence wasn't violence when the victims had been labeled as threats first. During lunch, Attorney Marcus Hale met them in an empty classroom. His usual confidence was tempered with concern. "Listen carefully," he said, closing the door. "The system here, the school, the police, all of it, they protect their own first. They'll bury evidence, twist facts, whatever it takes to maintain their version of order." "But the video," Zara started. "The video bought us time, that's all. They're already spinning it as proof of your violent tendencies. They'll use your self-defense to paint you as the aggressors." After school, the twins headed straight to the backyard. They wrapped their hands carefully, the way their grandfather had taught them. The training dummy they had set up bore the marks of previous sessions, dents and scuffs from countless strikes. For hours they worked. Punch combinations snapped out sharp and precise. Kicks sliced through the humid air. They drilled throws and locks until their muscles burned, then drilled them again. Sweat soaked through their clothes, despite the cool evening. Kira's knuckles were raw beneath the wraps, but she pushed through the pain. Each strike had to be perfect. Each block had to be automatic. Their grandfather's voice echoed in her head. Control is everything. Power without control is just violence. Zara worked the heavy bag until her legs trembled, then switched to speed drills. They moved in sync, their breathing steady, focused entirely on the work. They weren't training for competition anymore. This was about survival. The sun set, but they kept going by porch light. Their shadows danced across the grass as they sparred, testing defenses, probing weaknesses, strengthening both. No words were needed. They could read each other's movements instinctively, adjusting and adapting as one unit. Mrs. Gloria Hayes watched from the kitchen window, her face lined with worry. She had urged them toward peace, toward turning the other cheek, but she hadn't seen the notes. She hadn't heard the whispered threats or felt the hatred building in the halls. She didn't understand that peace wasn't an option when the other side had already chosen war. Finally, exhausted and drenched in sweat, the twins stopped. The night had grown thick around them, crickets chirping in the darkness. Their bodies ached, but their minds were clear. Standing in the backyard, they shared a look that said everything necessary. They would not be intimidated. They would not be driven out. And they absolutely would not be hunted. The burned porch creaked as they went inside, a reminder of what they faced. But they weren't helpless victims, and this wasn't going to play out the way their enemies planned. The town had mistaken their restraint for weakness. That mistake would cost them. The sun hadn't fully risen when Kira and Zara stepped into their backyard. Dawn painted the sky in strips of gray and purple. The grass still wet with dew. Their muscles protested from yesterday's training, but they pushed through the stiffness. "Ready?" Kira asked, rolling her shoulders. Zara nodded, bouncing on her toes to warm up. They started with the basics, the forms their grandfather had drilled into them since they could walk. Each movement flowed into the next, their breath creating clouds in the cool morning air. "Remember what Pop used to say?" Zara whispered between sets. "The morning air sharpens the mind." Kira's lips twitch, and the body follows. They move faster, adding power to their strikes. The training dummy rattled with each hit. Sweat began to bead on their foreheads despite the chill. Their grandfather's voice seemed to float between them. "Speed is nothing without accuracy. Accuracy is nothing without purpose." Mrs. Gloria Hayes appeared at the back door, worry etched on her face. "Girls, please, violence isn't the answer. We need to pray for those who persecute us." "Yes, ma'am," they answered together, but their fists didn't slow. The drive to school was tense. Mrs. Gloria Hayes gripped the steering wheel tight, her usual morning hymns replaced by quiet pleading. "Just keep your heads down. Don't give them any reason." But reasons didn't matter anymore. The moment they stepped through the school doors, the machine kicked into gear. Security guards materialized, following just close enough to watch, but not protect. Teachers suddenly needed them separated to maintain order. In English, Kira sat alone, while whispers hissed around her like snakes. "Heard they're gang members. My dad says they should be locked up. Animals like that don't belong here." The teacher's eyes slid past raised hands and obvious harassment, focused intently on her book. Between classes, the hallway became a gauntlet. Tyler's friends, huge wrestling team guys, took turns slamming into Kira, sending her books flying. Each collision came with a whispered promise. "After dark, you're done. Can't fight us all. Better sleep light." Security watched it happen, writing nothing down. In gym, Coach Langford's voice boomed across the court. "Washington, both of you, office now." They found him filling out forms, his pen scratching with deliberate slowness, just documenting your pattern of aggressive behavior for everyone's safety. You understand? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Wouldn't want any more accidents, would we? By lunch, the twins' phones buzzed with a message from Reed. His voice was tight with frustration. They're stonewalling everything. Complaints disappear. Witnesses change stories. Evidence gets misplaced. They're building their narrative while burying ours. So what do we do? Zara asked. Document everything. Record if you can. Be careful who you trust. This goes deeper than just the school. The rest of the day dragged like broken glass across skin. Every class brought new isolation tactics. Group projects suddenly had no room for them. Lab partners found excuses to switch. The message was clear. They were being erased. At home, the phones started ringing. Mrs. Gloria Hayes answered each call with Christian patience, but her hands shook harder each time. They need to go back where they came from. We don't want their kind here. Keep those animals away from our kids. Click, ring, repeat. Mrs. Gloria Hayes tried to hide it, but they saw her checking the locks twice, 3 times. Her prayers grew longer, more desperate. The house felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Night fell heavy and thick. The twins sat at their window, watching the street. A dark sedan idled across the way, its engine a low rumble in the quiet. No lights, no movement, just watching. They're trying to scare us, Zara whispered. Kira's voice was ice. They should be scared of us. They checked the doors again, double-checked the windows, drew the curtains tight against prying eyes. The house creaked and settled around them, every sound amplified by tension. Mrs. Gloria Hayes' voice drifted up from her nightly prayers. Lord, protect these children. Guide them away from darkness. But darkness had already found them. This wasn't random bullying anymore. This was coordinated, calculated pressure from all sides. The school isolating them, the police ignoring them, the community marking them. They lay in their beds, fully dressed, listening to the night. The car outside hadn't moved. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, twice, then silence. Their phones lit up with messages from unknown numbers. We see you. Sleep tight. Tick-tock. Kira's hand found Zara's in the dark, squeezing once. They didn't need words. They understood what this was now. The town had chosen its targets, and the hunt had begun. The question wasn't if they would fight back. The question was when. Outside, the car's engine purred steadily into the night, a mechanical growl promising violence to come. Inside, behind locked doors and drawn curtains, 2 sisters lay awake, muscles each from training, minds sharp with purpose. They weren't prey. They never had been. And soon the hunters would learn exactly what they'd cornered. The car engine finally died around midnight, leaving behind a silence that felt like a threat. Kira watched through a crack in the curtains as the sedan pulled away, its tail lights bleeding red into the darkness. Neither twin slept much that night, their bodies tense with anticipation. Morning came too quickly. Mrs. Gloria Hayes's face was drawn with exhaustion as she drove them to school, her usual morning prayers replaced by nervous glances in the rearview mirror. Lord, give us strength, she whispered more to herself than to them. The moment they stepped into the main hallway, they saw him. Tyler Vance stood by his locker, surrounded by his usual gang of wrestlers. His right wrist was wrapped in a black splint, held close to his chest like a badge of honor. When he caught sight of them, his face split into a grin that made Kira's stomach turn. Look who it is! Cookies he called out, loud enough to draw attention, but not quite loud enough for the teachers to intervene. The circus freaks are back. His friends laughed on cue, spreading out to block the hallway. Kira noticed how they positioned themselves. Not random, but coordinated. They'd planned this. Move, Zara said, her voice carrying that dangerous edge Kira recognized from their training days. Or what? Tyler flexed his good hand. You going to try something with all these cameras around? He gestured to the security equipment mounted in the corners. My dad's got some real clear footage of that cafeteria incident. Real clear. The twins separated slightly, creating space between them. A fighting instinct so deeply ingrained they didn't need to discuss it. The morning crowd parted around them, students pressing against lockers to watch, but not help. Coach Langford appeared at the end of the hall, arms crossed, watching with that same satisfied smirk. He made no move to intervene. The first bell rang, scattering the audience. Classes began, but the tension followed them like a shadow. In chemistry, someone knocked over their experiment. In history, their textbooks disappeared. Small things building pressure, waiting for someone to snap. It happened during fourth period. Zara headed to the gym to change for PE. The locker room was nearly empty this late in the period. She heard the door open behind her, but didn't turn fast enough. Tyler was there, his good hand shooting out to grab her arm. His fingers dug in deep enough to bruise, pinning her against the lockers. That fire, he whispered, breath hot against her ear. That was just practice. We're going to teach you what happens to... The rest of his threat disappeared in a spray of blood. Zara's strike was pure reflex, sharp, precise, and devastatingly effective. The crunch of cartilage was loud in the empty locker room. Tyler stumbled backward, blood pouring between his fingers as he clutched his shattered nose. The alarm blared almost immediately. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hall, security responding with suspicious speed as if they'd been waiting nearby. Zara didn't stick around. She was already moving, years of training taking over. She found Kira by their emergency meeting spot near the art room. One look was enough. They needed to go now. They slipped out through the gym's back exit while security converged on the locker room. The sounds of sirens grew in the distance. Someone had called the police again. They didn't stop running until they reached the old football field 3 blocks away. It was abandoned years ago when the school built their new stadium, leaving behind rusty bleachers and overgrown grass. Perfect visibility in all directions. No blind spots, no surprise angles. They were waiting for it, Kira said, scanning the perimeter. Security, the police, they wanted this. Zara touched her arm where Tyler had grabbed her. Purple marks were already forming. We need to end this, on our terms. They found a spot under the bleachers, protected from the afternoon sun, and started planning. They knew Tyler wouldn't let this go. His pride wouldn't allow it. He'd want revenge, and he'd bring numbers. So we picked the battlefield, Kira said, pulling out a burner phone they'd bought after the fire. Make him come to us. They created fake accounts, careful to route everything through public Wi-Fi far from home. The messages were perfect bait, hints of fear, promises of apology, suggestions of surrender, everything Tyler's ego needed to hear. Please leave us alone. We'll do whatever you want. Meet us at the old field tonight. Just you and your friends. We're sorry. Each message crafted to sound desperate, defeated. Each one designed to feed his sense of power. They knew he wouldn't be able to resist such an easy target. The responses came quickly, exactly as expected. Dead, bringing the whole team, going to learn respect. The twins spent the afternoon preparing the field. They memorized every dip in the ground, every loose board in the bleachers, every possible approach angle. The sun began to set, painting the sky in deep oranges and reds. Remember what Pop said about choosing your ground? Zara asked, stretching her shoulders. The smartest fighter picks the field, Kira quoted. The deadliest fighter owns it. They heard the engines before they saw the lights. Multiple vehicles approaching slowly from both access roads. Headlights swept across the abandoned field like searching eyes, illuminating patches of tall grass and broken equipment. The twins stood their ground as the cars drew closer, their shadows stretching long behind them. Engines growled in the gathering darkness, predatory and confident. More headlights joined the first pair, then more, forming a semicircle of approaching vehicles. They could see figures moving behind the glare, doors opening and closing, the sound of multiple feet on gravel. Low laughter, the metallic click of something heavy being lifted from a trunk. The stadium lights sputtered to life with a harsh electric buzz, casting uneven shadows across the overgrown grass. Car doors slammed in quick succession. Tyler emerged first, his broken nose covered with white tape that gleamed under the spotty lighting. 4 other boys flanked him, all wrestlers, all wearing their team jackets like armor. Their breath came out in visible puffs in the cool evening air. "Look at this," Tyler called out, his voice carrying across the field. They actually showed up to get their beating. He lifted something from behind his back, a baseball bat that caught the light as he swung it experimentally. The twins stood 30 yards away, positioned near a gap in the bleachers that offered multiple escape routes. They'd chosen their spot carefully, solid footing, clear sight lines, no chance of being surrounded. "Thought you were sorry," Tyler taunted, advancing with his crew spread out behind him. "Thought you wanted to apologize." "We're here," Kira said simply, her voice steady and controlled. She kept her hands loose at her sides, ready but not threatening. "That's not good enough anymore." Tyler's grin turned ugly. 2 of his friends circled wider, trying to flank them. "You broke my wrist. You broke my nose. Now we break you." "Last chance," Zara warned, shifting her weight slightly. "Walk away." Tyler's response was immediate. He lunged forward and shoved Kira hard, expecting her to stumble back in fear. Instead, she rolled with the push, redirecting his momentum past her. The movement brought her closer to one of the flanking wrestlers, who grabbed for her arm. That's when the real fight began. Zara moved like water, flowing under a wild punch from one of Tyler's friends. She caught his extended arm and used his own weight against him, pulling him off balance. Her hip check sent him airborne for a split second before he crashed down hard. Before he could recover, she trapped his arm in a precise hold that made him howl in pain. "Stay down," she commanded, applying just enough pressure to make her point clear. Simultaneously, Kira faced off against another wrestler who charged in swinging. She slipped past his guard with practiced ease, her strikes economic and devastating. A sharp blow to his knee buckled his leg. A follow-up strike to his shoulder dropped him to the ground, where he lay clutching his arm and gasping. The third boy hesitated, seeing his friends taken down so quickly. His uncertainty cost him. Zara was on him before he could retreat. She swept his legs out from under him and controlled his fall, making sure he landed hard enough to knock the fight out of him, but not hard enough to cause serious injury. Jesus Christ. The fourth wrestler backpedaled, tripping over his own feet in his haste to get away. He scrambled backward on all fours before finding his feet and running for the cars. Tyler stood frozen, the baseball bat hanging useless at his side. His face had lost all color, the confident sneer replaced by naked fear. He took a stumbling step backward, then another. "No, wait," he started to say, but Kira was already moving. She closed the distance in 3 quick steps. Her first strike knocked the bat from his grip. Her second caught him in the solar plexus. As he doubled over, gasping for air, she swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, all his previous bravado evaporating into the night air. "Please," he wheezed, curling into a protective ball. Please, don't. Remember this feeling, Kira said quietly, standing over him. Remember what it's like to be helpless. Remember what it's like to beg. In the distance, hidden behind the far bleachers, a phone camera recorded everything. Its owner remained silent, capturing every moment of Tyler's humiliation. Zara appeared at her sister's side. We need to go now. They could hear sirens in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Red and blue lights began to flash on the access road, still far enough away to give them time. Without another word, the twins melted away from the field. They moved fast but controlled, staying in the shadows cast by the stadium lights. Their footsteps were nearly silent on the packed earth, years of training evident in every precise movement. The wrestlers lay scattered across the field, moaning and clutching various injuries. None tried to follow. Tyler remained on the ground, his harsh breathing the only sound besides the approaching sirens. The twins reached the tree line just as the first police car turned onto the field access road. They disappeared into the darkness between the trunks, moving deeper into the cover of branches and leaves. The wail of sirens filled the night behind them, but they were already gone, two shadows becoming one with the darkness. Through the trees, they could see more emergency lights arriving. Radio chatter echoed across the field. Officers' flashlight beams swept the area, searching for signs of the twins, but finding only Tyler and his friends still sprawled on the ground. The old stadium lights continued to flicker overhead, casting strange patterns across the now empty battlefield. Wind rustled through the tall grass, erasing footprints and carrying away the last traces of the fight. In the darkness beyond the tree line, two sets of steady breathing moved further and further from the chaos they'd left behind. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when the first news van pulled up outside Mrs. Gloria Hayes's modest home. By morning, the quiet residential street had transformed into a makeshift media camp. Camera crews jostled for position on the sidewalk, while reporters delivered breathless updates about the viral vigilante twins. Inside, Kira sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. The field fight video had exploded overnight. Millions of views, thousands of comments, endless shares. Some called them heroes, others called them thugs. The divide seemed to fall along predictable lines. They're saying we planned it, Kira said quietly, showing the screen to Mrs. Gloria Hayes. That we lured them there to hurt them. Mrs. Gloria Hayes's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee. Lord have mercy, she whispered, watching another news van park across the street. What have they done to my girls? The doorbell rang for the 20th time that morning. They ignored it just as they'd ignored all the others. The twins had pulled the curtains closed, but camera flashes still penetrated the fabric, creating strange patterns on the walls. By mid-morning, their phones buzzed constantly with messages of support from civil rights groups and activists. The NAACP released a statement demanding an investigation into the school's handling of racial harassment. Black Twitter erupted with hashtags. The pressure seemed to be working. Coach Langford had gone unusually quiet. No statements, no classes, just a locked office door and an empty parking spot. But Kira recognized the silence for what it was, not surrender, but calculation. At midday, the school board issued a carefully worded press release announcing an internal review of all relevant incidents. Principal Brooks appeared briefly on local news, looking uncomfortable as she confirmed Tyler's temporary suspension while we examined the facts. Look at this, Zara said, reading from her phone. They're pulling up Coach Langford's old social media posts. Someone found Confederate flag pictures on his private Facebook. Around afternoon, Attorney Marcus Hale arrived, navigating through the media gauntlet with practiced ease. He spread documents across the kitchen table, restraining order applications, records requests, formal complaints to the Department of Education's Civil Rights Division. "We've got momentum now," Hale explained, his voice steady and reassuring. "The video changes everything. It proves self-defense, shows premeditation on their part with the weapons. We can demand access to all internal communications, expose the pattern." A heavy knock cut him off, not the polite tapping of reporters, but the authoritative pound of law enforcement. "Ayanna Washington, this is the police. We have a warrant for your arrest." Mrs. Gloria Hayes's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the linoleum. Hale moved quickly to the door, legal pad in hand. "I'm her attorney," he called out. "I need to see that warrant immediately." The door opened to reveal 4 officers, with Chief Harlan Mercer himself standing front and center. He held up a document with undisguised satisfaction. "Assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm," Mercer read, his eyes fixed on Zara. "Based on the incident in the school locker room, we have Coach Langford's statement and Tyler's eyewitness account." "That's a lie," Kira stepped forward, but Hale held her back. She was defending herself first. Coach Langford wasn't even there. "You can tell it to the judge," Mercer said, nodding to his officers. They moved towards Zara with handcuffs ready. "No!" Mrs. Gloria Hayes stumbled forward, her face ashen. "She's just a child. You can't—" "Ma'am, step back," one officer warned, reaching for Zara's wrists. "Don't touch her." Kira lunged, but Hale wrapped his arms around her, holding her back. "Stop," he hissed in her ear. "Getting arrested too won't help her." The handcuffs clicked close around Zara's wrists. She didn't resist, but her eyes locked with Kira's, steady, determined, unafraid. Mrs. Gloria Hayes pressed a hand to her chest, swaying on her feet. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. I can't, she gasped, then crumpled to the floor. "Mrs. Hayes!" the twins shouted in unison. Haley was already on his phone calling 911. "We need an ambulance, possible heart attack or stroke." The officers paused, uncertain, but Chief Mercer barked, "Get the suspect in the car now." They led Zara out through the crowd of shocked reporters, cameras flashing like strobe lights. Inside, Mrs. Gloria Hayes lay pale and still while Hale performed chest compressions. Kira knelt beside her foster mother, holding her hand, tears streaming down her face. Paramedics arrived within minutes, quickly assessing Mrs. Gloria Hayes before loading her onto a stretcher. "Stress-induced cardiac event," one muttered, attaching monitors. Through the window, Kira watched the police car carrying her sister disappear around the corner. The ambulance screamed away in the opposite direction with Mrs. Gloria Hayes. She stood alone in the chaos of the ransacked living room, surrounded by spilled coffee and scattered legal papers. Hours later, darkness fell over the county jail. In a stark holding cell, Zara sat on a thin metal bench, her back against the concrete wall. The cell was eerily quiet except for distant footsteps and the hum of fluorescent lights. She hadn't moved or spoken since they locked her in. Her eyes remained fixed on the blank wall opposite her, but her mind raced through calculations and consequences. They'd finally done it. Used the system itself as a weapon. Turned her self-defense into a crime. She could almost hear Coach Langford's voice, weaving his false witness statement. Could picture Tyler's smirk as he signed his name to lies. The wall stared back at her, gray and unyielding, while somewhere in the darkness, the machinery of injustice ground forward. Night settled over Memorial Hospital like a heavy blanket, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows in the empty hallway. Kira sat alone in a worn plastic chair, her hands trembling despite her attempts to keep them still. The antiseptic smell burned her nose, and every beep from the nearby nurse's station made her flinch. Mrs. Gloria Hayes lay in the room behind her, hooked up to monitors that tracked her vital signs with steady pulses. The doctors had explained it earlier, a mild stroke brought on by severe stress. She's stable, they'd said, but needs complete rest. Kira's phone buzzed again. Another message from Hale. DA's office pushing hard. Need to discuss options. She pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting exhaustion. The last 24 hours felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Zara in jail, Mrs. Gloria Hayes in the hospital, and now Miss Washington. A gentle voice made her look up. Two women in business attire stood before her, their expressions practiced and professional. One held a folder stamped with the Department of Child Services logo. "I'm Sandra Mills," the taller one said, "and this is my colleague, Lisa Porter. We're here to discuss your current situation." Kira straightened, her grandfather's training kicking in automatically. Observe, analyze, prepare. "Given recent events," Mills continued, settling into a chair across from her, "we have serious concerns about placement stability. With Mrs. Gloria Hayes' medical condition and your sister's legal situation, we're not going anywhere," Kira said quietly. Porter leaned forward, her voice honey-sweet. "Sweetie, we understand this is difficult, but with the circumstances—" "My sister was defending herself," Kira cut in, "and Mrs. Gloria Hayes will recover." "The court system may take months to resolve your sister's case," Mills explained, "and in situations like this, we often need to consider separate placements." "No." The word came out sharp as a blade. "Miss Washington, you're not separating us." Kira's voice remained low, but carried an edge that made both women pause. "Our lawyer will handle this." As if summoned, Hale appeared at the end of the hallway, his tie loosened and jacket wrinkled. He'd been working nonstop since the arrest. "Ladies," he nodded to the social workers, then turned to Kira. "We need to talk now." The social workers retreated, promising to return later. Hale waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. "Wade Mercer is pushing to try Zara as an adult," he said without preamble. "He's the DA and Tyler's uncle. They're painting the locker room incident as premeditated assault." Kira's hands clenched. She was defending herself. "I know that, but they've got Coach Langford claiming he witnessed her attack Tyler unprovoked. They're using the field fight video to establish a pattern of violence." A nurse walked past, pushing a cart of medications. Kira waited until the squeaking wheels faded before responding. "What about the harassment? The fire? All of it?" Hale's face tightened. "Police closed the arson investigation. No evidence, they say. And the school board is backing Principal Brooks' handling of the situation. They're claiming they responded appropriately to all complaints." Dawn was breaking when Kira received the text from the school administration. Immediate expulsion. Effective immediately. Security would escort her to clear out her locker. The hallways were nearly empty when she arrived, but word spread fast. Students gathered at a distance, phones recording. Some jeered, others watched silently. A few, mostly black students she'd never spoken to, raised fists in solidarity. Coach Langford stood in his office doorway as she passed, his face twisted in a sneer. "Animals belong in cages," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. She kept walking, her grandfather's voice in her head. Control the battle, not the emotion. Outside the school, a small group had gathered on the sidewalk, strangers with handmade signs. "Justice for the twins! Stop racist violence!" They cheered when they saw her, but their voices felt distant, unreal. That evening, she sat in the jail's visiting area, separated from Zara by thick glass. Her sister looked tired but unbroken, her eyes clear and focused. They didn't need words. Years of training together, moving as one, had taught them to read each other's smallest gestures. Kira placed her hand against the glass. Zara matched it on her side. The message was clear in their shared gaze. The system wouldn't protect them. Permission for justice would never come. They had been patient, followed the rules, trusted the process, and watched it turn against them. Visiting hours ended too soon. Guards led Zara away, while Kira gathered her things from the security check. The jail parking lot was dark, half the lights burned out or broken. Kira stood under one of the working ones, her phone glowing in her hands. She opened her camera app, took a deep breath, and began recording. "My name is Kira Washington," she said, her voice steady. "I'm 16 years old. If you're seeing this, it means something has happened to me or my sister. Everything I'm about to show you is true. We have proof." She detailed each piece of evidence carefully: the ignored complaints, the security footage, the fire report discrepancies. She kept her tone controlled, factual, letting the truth speak for itself. "This isn't about bullying," she concluded. "This is about power, about who gets to feel safe in their own school, their own home, their own skin, and about what happens when you fight back." She saved the video, set it to post automatically if she didn't stop it, and looked up at the courthouse looming across the street. The morning sun cast long shadows across its stone steps, where people were already beginning to gather for the day's proceedings. Inside those walls, they would try to brand her sister a violent criminal. They would attempt to separate them, silence them, make them disappear into the system, just like they'd done to others before them. But this time would be different. This time they had receipts. The flash drive felt heavy in her pocket as she stood outside the jail, phone still recording, watching the courthouse doors. It was almost 11. In 3 hours, they would try to move Zara. In 8 hours, the town's power players would gather for homecoming, believing their system was still secure. They had no idea what was coming. Dark clouds hung heavy over the courthouse at midday, matching the tension in the air. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes raised like warning flags. Kira stood in plain sight on the public sidewalk, her phone live streaming, surrounded by a small crowd of people holding up their own cameras. "Keep recording," she called out clearly. "Everything that happens here needs to be seen." The transport van rolled up right on schedule, its white paint dusty and marked with county lettering. Behind it, an unmarked black SUV pulled to a stop, and Chief Harlan Mercer stepped out, his face tight with controlled anger. "Clear the area," he ordered, gesturing at his officers. "This is a secure prisoner transport. Media needs to stay behind the yellow line." But the reporters held their ground, cameras rolling. Sarah Collins from the Regional Tribune pushed forward with her microphone. "Chief Mercer, can you comment on allegations that your department ignored multiple documented incidents of racial harassment at the high school?" His jaw clenched. "This is about a violent assault case, nothing more. Clear the area now." That's when Kira spotted them. Tyler's friends moving into position, spreading out along the courthouse steps. Jake Thompson, wrestling team captain. Marcus Webb, whose father was on the city council. 3 more boys she recognized from the cafeteria fight. They weren't here by accident. "They're setting up an ambush," Kira said loudly, making sure her live stream picked it up. "Look at how they're positioning themselves." More phones came up, capturing the scene from different angles. The boys tried to look casual, but their movements were too coordinated, too practiced. They'd been given instructions. The van's back door swung open. 2 deputies stepped out, moving to escort Zara. She appeared in the doorway, handcuffed, head high. Keep those cameras rolling, Kira shouted as Chief Mercer tried to force reporters back. They're going to try something, and everyone needs to see it. She pulled the flash drive from her pocket, holding it up so it caught the gray light. This contains security footage proving who really started the violence. It shows Coach Langford meeting with students before attacks. Shows Chief Mercer at our house before the fire was even reported. Jake Thompson lunged forward suddenly, trying to grab the drive. Kira was ready. She stepped inside his reach, deflected his grab with her forearm, and drove her knee up into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping. When Marcus Webb charged in to help, Kira pivoted and struck precisely. One sharp hit to disable his shoulder, another to sweep his legs. Both boys went down hard. "Self-defense," she called out clearly, backing away with her hands raised. "I'm not pursuing them. I'm only defending myself." She tossed the flash drive in a high arc towards Sarah Collins. The reporter caught it as Chief Mercer shouted, "Stop her!" But now there were too many witnesses, too many cameras. A young court officer named Rodriguez moved to put himself between Zara and the remaining boys, his hand on his weapon. "Everyone stay back." Sirens wailed in the distance, but these were different. State police cruisers appeared at both ends of the street, lights flashing. Two unmarked sedans pulled up and men in suits stepped out, holding up badges. "State Bureau of Investigation," one announced loudly. "This scene is now under our jurisdiction." Chief Mercer's face went pale. "This is a local matter." "Not anymore," the agent cut him off. "We've received multiple credible reports of civil rights violations and corruption. This courthouse is now a crime scene." More sirens approached, different agencies responding to the media presence and growing chaos. Zara's cuffs were removed as the state took custody. She moved immediately to stand beside her sister on the courthouse steps. The twins stood shoulder to shoulder, watching as Chief Mercer argued with state officials. Camera flashes lit up the darkening sky. News helicopters circled overhead. Local officers looked uncertain, no longer sure who was in charge. "You okay?" Kira asked quietly. "Better now," Zara replied, her voice steady. "They really thought they could trap us? They're used to people being afraid." Their mistake. Around them, the chaos grew. More news vans arrived. Protesters began gathering with hastily made signs. State police established a perimeter while investigators collected statements. The sirens kept coming. Not local ones this time, but vehicles from agencies beyond county control. Chief Mercer stood alone now, watching his control slip away as higher authorities took command of the scene. The remaining boys who had planned to ambush the twins were being questioned by state investigators, their confidence cracking under official scrutiny. The first heavy drops of rain began to fall as emergency lights painted the courthouse red and blue. But the twins didn't move. They had earned this spot, this moment, this vindication. They had forced the truth into the open where it couldn't be buried or denied. More sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder. Rain pelted the courthouse steps as attorney Marcus Hale hurried the twins toward his car. State investigators had spent hours taking their statements, documenting every detail of the corruption they'd uncovered. Now the sky was darkening, but their work wasn't done. "We need to show everyone," Hale said, wiping rain from his glasses as they climbed into his sedan. "The whole town needs to see this where they can't look away." "Homecoming," Kira said. "Everyone who matters will be there." "The school board," Zara added. "The donors, the parents who pretended not to see." Haley nodded grimly and started the engine. "That's exactly right. No more hiding behind closed doors and private meetings. This gets aired where the whole community has to face it." They drove through sheets of rain toward Jefferson High's football stadium. Friday night lights pierced the darkness and cars filled every parking space for blocks. The stands were packed with people in school colors, umbrellas dotting the crowd like mushrooms. Side entrance, Hale directed, pulling around to a maintenance gate. I called ahead to some staff who have been watching this unfold. They want to be on the right side of history. A security guard named Williams met them there, radio clipped to his belt. "Follow me," he said quietly. "Some of us have been waiting for someone to expose this." They moved through service corridors, past storage rooms and equipment lockers. Another staff member, Ms. Rodriguez from the front office, joined them with a key card. "The control booth," she whispered. "That's where you can show everything." The booth sat high above the bleachers, accessible by a narrow stairway. Inside, a student tech named Danny stared at them with wide eyes, recognition and fear battling on his face. "We need the main display," Kira said calmly. "The evidence has to be seen." Danny glanced between them and the equipment, then stepped back from the controls. "I don't want any part of stopping you," he said. "Just don't hurt me, okay?" "We only hurt people who attack us first," Zara assured him. Kira plugged the flash drive into the system. Below, the game was in full swing. Jefferson High versus their rivals from Carter County. The hometown crowd roared as their teams scored. The screen flickered, then went black. When it came back on, security footage filled the massive display. Coach Langford appeared, meeting with Tyler in an empty hallway, pointing and gesturing with clear intent. The timestamp matched records of attacks that followed. The crowd's cheering died into confused murmurs. The next clip showed security cameras being redirected away from the Holloway house just before the fire. Then came split-screen footage. The official dispatch log showing when the fire was reported, alongside video of Chief Mercer already on scene, talking to Coach Langford. A gasp rippled through the stadium. Someone shouted, "Play it again!" The chant spread. "Play it again! Play it again!" Danny, still at the controls, looked to the twins. At their nod, he restarted the footage. The evidence played again on the huge screen, irrefutable in the rain. Coach Langford thrashed against the trooper's grip, screaming about order and respect, but his words were drowned out by the crowd's growing chant. Chief Mercer arrived with local officers, but state authorities blocked their jurisdiction. Handcuffs gleamed under the stadium lights as they were secured. More state vehicles arrived, lights flashing through the rain. The homecoming game was forgotten as justice finally broke through the surface. The twins stood on the platform, watching it unfold. Their grandfather had taught them that winning meant choosing the right moment, the right place, the right way to expose the truth. Here, under these lights, in front of the whole town, no one could pretend they didn't see. The evidence played again on the massive screen while red and blue lights swept the rain-soaked field. There would be no more shadows to hide in, no more silence to hide behind. The fluorescent lights of the courthouse hallway buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the vinyl flooring. Kira and Zara sat on either side of Mrs. Gloria Hayes's wheelchair, their hands resting protectively on her armrests. Attorney Marcus Hale stood before them, his tie loosened after the sleepless night, scrolling through an endless stream of news alerts on his phone. "It's everywhere," Hale said, his voice rough from hours of statements and interviews. "Every major network, every social platform. The evidence is bulletproof." Mrs. Gloria Hayes reached up and squeezed Kira's hand. Though still weak from her stroke, her grip held surprising strength. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she whispered, "sometimes through fists." Zara almost smiled at that, but her attention snapped to the heavy courthouse doors as they burst open. A wave of reporters surged forward, held back only by state police barriers. Camera flashes strobed through the glass. "The state attorney general is making the announcement now," Hale said, turning up the volume on a nearby television mounted to the wall. On screen, a stern-faced woman in a charcoal suit stood at a podium bristling with microphones. After reviewing extensive evidence, the state of South Carolina is assuming full control of this investigation. We are filing federal civil rights charges against Coach Trent Langford for conspiracy to violate civil rights, racial intimidation, and tampering with evidence. The hallway fell silent as she continued. Through the courthouse windows, they could see news vans still arriving, parking haphazardly on the lawn. Additionally, the Attorney General continued, Chief Harlan Mercer is being charged with obstruction of justice and abuse of authority. The camera cut to live footage of Mercer being led out of the police station, his face ashen as officers removed his badge and gun belt. The man who had terrorized their community for decades looked small without his uniform. Dear God, Mrs. Gloria Hayes breathed, crossing herself. Hale's phone buzzed constantly with updates. District Attorney Wade Mercer has been suspended from the Bar Association pending criminal prosecution, he read. They're escorting him from his office right now. As if on cue, they heard shouting from the floor above. Wade Mercer's voice echoed down the stairwell, protesting, as officers led him out in handcuffs. He caught sight of the twins and Mrs. Gloria Hayes as he passed. You'll regret this, he snarled, struggling against the officers. This town won't forget. Move along. A state trooper cut him off, pushing him firmly toward the exit. Zara stood, her voice clear and steady. No, we won't forget. That's the point. A court clerk hurried over with a stack of papers, handing them to Hale. He scanned them quickly, his expression brightening. All charges against Zara are dismissed with prejudice, he announced. They can never be refiled, and Kira's expulsion has been overturned and expunged from all records. Mrs. Gloria Hayes began to weep softly, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. My girls, she said. My brave, brave girls. More officials approached, representatives from the state's Family Services Division. They carried documents establishing permanent guardianship protections for Mrs. Gloria Hayes and guaranteed medical coverage for her ongoing care. There's more, Hale said, reading from his phone. Principal Brooks just submitted her resignation. The State Board of Education has barred her from any administrative position in South Carolina schools. Through the windows, they watched Brooks hurry to her car, head down, ignoring the reporters shouting questions. Her carefully maintained image of neutrality had crumbled under the weight of her complicity. A woman in a tailored suit approached their group, introducing herself as the director of a prominent Black-led educational foundation. We've been following your story, she said warmly. We want to offer you both full scholarships, any university you choose, and we've arranged immediate transfer to a private academy to complete your high school education. She handed them thick folders containing housing details, school information, and financial documentation. We've secured a property for your family in a safe neighborhood, far from here. Everything is ready whenever you want to leave. Mrs. Gloria Hayes studied the papers with trembling hands. A real home, she whispered. No more looking over our shoulders. State troopers approached, their presence commanding respect rather than fear. We'll escort you out when you're ready, the lead officer said, not because you need protection anymore, but to make sure no one tries to interfere with your departure. Kira stood, stretching muscles stiff from the long night. We're ready, she said simply. They moved as a group through the courthouse, Mrs. Gloria Hayes's wheelchair gliding smoothly across the polished floors. The crowds parted before their escort, cameras flashing, but kept at a respectful distance. Outside, morning sunlight painted the sky in soft pinks and golds. The air felt cleaner somehow, lighter. Their vehicles waited at the bottom of the courthouse steps, not police cars, but unmarked state SUVs with tinted windows. As the troopers helped Mrs. Gloria Hayes into the vehicle, Kira and Zara paused on the steps. They looked back at the courthouse where justice had finally been served, at the town that had tried to break them. "Ready?" Zara asked softly. Kira nodded, taking her sister's hand. "Ready." They climbed into the SUV and the convoy pulled away from the courthouse. Behind them, the media frenzy continued, but its noise faded quickly. Each mile put more distance between them and the hatred they'd expose. That evening found them in their new home, surrounded by unopened boxes and the promise of peace. Through large windows, they watched the sun paint the unfamiliar horizon in brilliant orange. No police sirens wailed in the distance. No hostile whispers followed them here. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.